Everybody's on pills. Everybody's got some mental disorder. So we either have to believe that everybody legitimately has, like, something went wrong in the past 20 years and now everybody has some kind of real disease, or this is something that this is sort of like a mass hysteria. This is something that everybody's buying into. It's the trendy thing, which I think it's the latter. So that's my take on it.
Okay. Anybody else want to chime in?
I mean, I think I would say depression is obviously like a real thing for whatever the causes are. Obviously, it's something that we have to address or figure out. But the thing is that like just like bullying people doesn't seem to fix anything, right? If that was true, there'd be no fat people in society if bullying fixed things.
No, we say stop fat shaming and they get fatter.
Do you think that like health at every size started in what, like the 2000s? Do you think that's when fat people were first invented?
Yeah, but there's more fat people now than there ever were, and now we.
There were already people becoming fat. They were becoming fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter.
More now, there's more, and we say don't body shame. Don't you see the correlation?
So this is
Destiny. We put fat people up on billboards in Times Square now. They're underwear.
This is the entire problem encapsulated in one issue with your worldview. You have a trendy way of viewing the world that feels good. Your audience like sucks you off. You feel like you got the answer for everything. And the answer is just libs and conservatives. And it's a very simplistic way that you can view the world and view all the problems and have an answer to everything. The reality is that we have highly processed food and that we have incredibly lazy lifestyles. And they're getting worse and worse in terms of exercise, right? That's the issue. But combating those problems is hard, right? How do we deal with like the amount of fucking calories we get in our diet every day? How do we deal with the fact that we have like more carbs and sugars than ever before? How do we deal with the fact that we don't get exercise? Those are hard problems, and those answers aren't always fun. But you know what is fun? You know what is fun? Is going on Twitter and being like, wow, look at this fucking advertisement in Times Square. There's a fat person. That must be where they're coming from. But what a complete and total misunderstanding of where these people come from in society.
Anthony, you're like conveniently ignoring the fact that we have this body acceptance movement and also a rise in obesity. How are you ignoring that?
First of all, you're delusional if you think anybody wants to be fat. And secondly, we had fat people before body acceptance.
That's not true at all. It's not delusional. You just accept it. They call people brave if you're fat now.
You just don't. Why do they even have to do that? It's because of how fucking miserable fat people are. You don't need a skinny acceptance movement, and you don't need an athletic acceptance movement. The whole reason why fat acceptance exists is because fat people hate fucking being fat, and they still do. If you don't believe that, you're insane.
No, people are delusional. How are you calling me delusional if they obviously don't want to be fat?
Because you think fat people come from billboards in Times Square when nobody would choose to be fat if they have the opportunity to.
I said that was one reason because of the.
It's not even a reason. That was created because there were a lot of fat people. It didn't create fat people. What are your thoughts on the fat acceptance movement? We didn't get to hear much. Fat acceptance is cringe as fuck. The problem with like every left-leaning liberal movement or left-leaning progressive movement, it's probably true of right-leaning movements as well, is there's always like there's an aspect of truth to it, but it ends up always getting pushed too far. So like, you should always love yourself and you should always love your body. But the difficulty for a human is to simultaneously accept a love of something and a criticism of something at the same time. We tend to be really binary with how we view things. And one of the side effects of that is that any negative trait we have, we always try to reframe that trait in a positive light instead of being upfront and honest about the negativity of the trait. So like one example of this might be, let's say you don't go to the gym. Instead of just saying like, oh yeah, like I'm out of shape and I'm weak, and I should be. Instead of saying something like that, what people do is they'll reframe it as like, oh well, I shouldn't work out anyway. It's a waste of time. I do better things otherwise. Or like people will make excuses for it. They'll take a negative trait and they'll try to spin it in a positive light instead of just saying like, you know what, I can love myself, I can love my body, but yeah, this is like a negative trait of mine as well. And I think that's the issue with fat acceptance, and that like the fundamental idea of like, listen, I'm overweight, but that doesn't mean I have to hate myself. That's true, and you can even love your body without hating it while acknowledging that there's like some negatives of it. But it gets pushed too far, and then you get people saying things like, well, just because you're fat doesn't mean you're unhealthy. Well, yeah, being fat is by definition unhealthy. There's a whole host of like negative outcomes that are related just to being overweight. Even if you exercise and everything else, just being overweight in and of itself is a bad thing, So yeah, that's the issue with the fat at every size thing, that it tries to reframe a negative and a positive instead of just saying you can simultaneously accept the negative aspect of yourself without hating yourself at the same time. I think you have to love yourself enough to change yourself for the better. That's why the fat acceptance movement exists. You got to love yourself throughout the journey. Yeah, true. That's true as well. That's something that I said actually, is that like one of the reasons why you get into a bad cycle when you start to get fat too, where you can't even see yourself in a positive light. Like you just kind of assume like once you're fat, you're always fat. I read some stats at some point. I'm probably never find it again. I don't even know if it's real. I probably should stop quoting it. But it was like of all the people that make it into the obese BMI range, it's like 2% ever make it back to normal BMI. It's like an absurdly small number, which I believe hearing it, but it'd be nice to see that replicated somewhere or to see if that's actually comes from a study or something. But part of fat acceptance, or not fat acceptance, part of health at every size should probably be the idea that like, listen, I love my body, so I know I can do better. You know, that idea that like any journey from being obese or overweight back to normal has to start from some common understanding of like discipline or love for yourself, because you probably need that self-respect or love for yourself to even want to work on getting back to a normal weight. You fucked yourself hard when you said nobody wants to be fat. To be honest, there's very clearly people who do. No, you're way too online if you think that. That is some actual crazy online shit. There are not this large swath of people that want to be fat. They might even say so outwardly, but that's a cope. That's absolutely not true. Is BMI a good metric to use? Yeah, BMI is like a good like rough estimate metric. There's nothing wrong with using it. Is Lizzo not the biggest celebrity example of the? I don't know anything about this person. I'm not sure. I'm sure there are some celebrities that give you like shitty messaging on things, but I don't know anything about this one in particular. Do you think there's any hope for Nick? No. And then I'll start digging through his profile, and this dude's got like a YouTube channel with 250 videos with 7 views each, and half the views are his family, like trying to